Hello, Chris.
Hello, hello.
So excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here.
We are just going to give it a little bit more time to have some people join in. Thank you so much.
Okay. I'll just sit quietly by.
And we're going to mute everybody. My name is Judy, by the way.
Hi, Judy.
Hi. All right. And where are you in the world right now? I mean, I've seen interviews and all of that kind of stuff of like you being from California a bit. Where are you now?
I'm in Pasadena.
Oh, okay. How have you been with the
Yes.
fires and everything?
We've been spared, so we were very fortunate. So,
Okay, that's
yeah.
awesome. Yeah,
Yes.
I wanted to make an intro between you and one of my clients, Susan Liu. She wrote a book called The Manicurist's Daughter, and she was talking about the fall of Saigon as well, and like this being the 50th anniversary.
Yes.
And so I thought you both would have a lot of. She was like a NPR and Smithsonian nominated and all of that kind of stuff. So she's excited to get to know you a bit better.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
What is the format? How does this work?
Yeah, good question. So it's going to be an organic conversation. I'm going to ask
Great.
you questions, and the theme is love, and so all contexts of love. And then at the very end, I'm going to open it up for Q&A. We have a lot of people, both people who are in the authentic Asian community, and then other people who are outside of the community. Um, the whole common thread and theme is that we're all Asian American women. We are all at different levels of either entrepreneurship or our corporate executive careers, and mostly it's just the space to be open and honest and maybe talk about things that you haven't explored or just like being able to have that thread. So we have a lot of shared experiences growing up, tiger parenting, the whole shebang.
Okay.
Yeah. I know I watched one of your interviews and you were talking about like you starting to like fail out of certain subjects in school, like, or not failing out, but your friend, your classmate got a C and then they got like a car or something like that. And you're like, are you kidding? If I got a B, it would be like the end of me. And so
Hmm.
very much a shared understanding. Well,
Yeah.
we want to honor your time. And so there might be some latecomers joining.
Okay.
Ooh, I didn't do the thumbs down. It's like thumbs down to the latecomers. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. Very excited to have you. I personally have been following you. I have a branding and marketing agency, so my designer shared a video like a couple of years ago about you. And then since then, I was like, I love everything that you talk about in regards to valuing the gifts that you bring into the world and all of that kind of stuff. So, for anyone else who may be newer to you, would you please just share a little bit about yourself and how you became Christo the way that you are now?
Yes. Well, I think my mom and dad had more to do with the how I became Christo than I have. Hi, everybody. My name is Christo. I'm a first generation immigrant, a refugee from Vietnam, came to the United States in 1975, and for a long time was searching for my identity and suffered what a lot of immigrants go through, which is a loss of self and wanting to fit in to be accepted. And so I've done a lot of personal work to kind of sort that out. I carried a lot of self-inflicted shame about my own identity, my own ethnicity, my language, my people, my culture, my customs. And it took a long time to get there. I found that through the portal of graphic design. So when I got into Art Center, I studied graphic design. I was just like, I could build my identity around this. Maybe not around being a Vietnamese American, but I'm a graphic designer. I feel good about this label and I wore it for many years. And it kind of propelled me to eventually make content. When I was 42 years old, started making some YouTube content talking about my experience as a business owner, an entrepreneur, working in commercial production in the advertising industry. And that caught the attention of a couple of people. So slowly I migrated away from doing client work, directing commercials and music videos, into doing content full time. That's what I do right now. And I've been very fortunate to build up a pretty loyal and engaged fan base. Maybe more of a community where I show up in the world and they show up for me. And I think that's just my mantra, the way I live now, my ethos. I just want to try and support others and make a living doing that.
That's amazing. I mean, you have 2.6 something million followers on YouTube. So obviously, people agree that you have something valuable to share and to say, which is amazing. Since this is an Asian American group, I would love to just dive into that a little bit more. You chose a career path that was creative. And I know you have siblings and you have parents who, maybe had different expectations. Art school was not something in my household that was like, an option to check. So I'm curious as to your upbringing and like, especially you emigrating over to the United States. Can you share a bit about that experience?
Yeah, like the early years, the dark years.
Yeah, well, the early dark years, just so people know where you
Yeah.
come from.
Okay. It wasn't necessarily our first choice, but our country went through a civil war. We fled Vietnam in April 30th, 1975. You pointed out before that it was the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. My parents landed in Kansas City, Missouri. It was where we lived for a little while in I think a three-story brick, like low-income house. And it was happy times for us, but I didn't know any better. I had no memory of Vietnam. I knew we were different. I knew we stood out, and I didn't quite understand why. Ultimately, we made our way to San Jose, California, where I kind of grew up. So I'm like, I grew up in San Jose, and I was made in Vietnam, but I grew up in San Jose. And the typical thing for all of my cousins and relatives is to be in the engineering science space, to be a professional person. And I know that at that point in time, for context, like in the 70s and 80s, it was really about getting a stable job and doing something legitimate and having predictable income. And it took me a long time to realize the trauma that my parents went through along with their siblings about losing everything. It's hard for me to imagine this. We're going through some crazy fires here and people are losing their homes. You can rebuild a house, but how do you rebuild a country that you lose? And the deep familial ties you have, your roots and who you are as a person has been all uprooted. So there was a bit of like chaos that my parents dealt with that they shielded me from, but through therapy, I learned that some of it, even if it's not spoken, you inherit, you feel it from them.
Yeah.
So their mindsets around money, around opportunity and risk is very different. And so we kind of have to take that into context, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you mentioned at the very get-go about the shame. And so I have a podcast, it's called Fuck Saving Face. So I've interviewed a lot of different experts about like the shame idea and how much we internalize that. And a lot of therapists will say for Asian Americans, especially, like the number one thing that they see people experiencing is that sense of shame and the
Yeah.
internalized shame. And then a lot of parenting is that authoritarian parenting, which is like, do as I tell you to do. And so anytime you don't fit into that mold, it then creates like all these other feelings. And so you chose this career path that's creative, which
Yeah.
in and of itself is so, different and bold. And I think any creative, regardless of your ethnicity or race, you have to stand into that ownership of that gift. And so I would love to hear how you mentioned internal work. Like, what were some of the things that you did to really embrace who you are and who you're meant to be?
Okay, so for context, I just want to let everybody know I'm one of three boys. I'm the
Mm.
middle child with all the middle child trappings and stereotypes and tropes, right? So I'm a middle child. My older brother, he's like a larger human than me. His bones are bigger, his hands are bigger, his frame is bigger, and he's a lot smarter than me. He graduated from Stanford with his master's degree. He has a 4.0 GPA with AP classes. I'm the guy who's like skating A minus B plus territory. I think my GPA is like 3.8 or something, 3.75. I'm not killing it on the SATs. And so the opportunities, the things I was supposed to be doing, going to schools, proper schools and studying computer science or whatever it is I was supposed to be studying, I just didn't even get into. I readily tell people I applied to UC San Diego, UCLA, and Cal Poly Pomona, and I was rejected out of all three schools. I even tried applying into their design program, and I didn't have a portfolio good enough for them to even accept me. I wish I still have this piece of paper, my rejection letter, because I would probably dip it in gold and just frame it and say, look, life kind of throws things at you. And at first, I do what a normal like 17, 18-year-old kid does, which is like, wow, I'm so upset, you guys. You don't know what kind of talent you're saying no to, right? You have that normal reaction like, you can't hate me, I hate you first. No, it's true, you hate me, and I wanted to be liked by you, but they just didn't accept me. And I remember one letter, I think it was from UCLA, said, your portfolio demonstrates potential, but we're not ready to accept you now. And I was like, potential, my God. okay, what does that all mean? And so that kind of started a little fire. I'm not going to say it was a big fire. It was kind of more of a low burning heat thing because it wasn't enough for me to get my ass into gear. It just wasn't. So I went to community college. I'm like, what am I going to do with my life? And, I kind of, my parents never said this to me, but I kind of felt the disappointment.
Mm.
And my brother set an incredibly unrealistic benchmark of what we're supposed to be doing, right? Like he's now done with UCSD and he's like studying for the GRE so he can go to grad school. And here I am getting rejected out of every school I applied to. It's like, oh my gosh. So I'm gonna go to community college, and it's like Asian parents' worst nightmare because that's where good kids go to like join gangs, I think, and do vocational training, right? And so there was that. And the shame that I wanted to share with you wasn't so much that my parents wanted more for me and I couldn't achieve that. My shame
Mm.
is a much deeper rooted one. Okay, so it's like uh, late 70s in Northern California. It's not the diverse culture accepting thing that we think it might be. Like California is very progressive relative to the rest of the country. Even at that time, I had people who wanted to fight me for
Mm.
being nothing more than being Asian. In
Mm.
some classes, I was the only Asian person they ever had seen. So they're like, what food do you eat? Where do you come from? What do you smell like? It's
Mm.
really weird. So I started to internalize some of the racism. And this happens a lot where white was right and whatever is not white is not right. And I carried that with me for a long time. And I got to a point, and I'll share this. I kept asking my uncle, who was like looking after me. I would hang out with him on the weekends. He would take me on trips, and we would go do fun things. And he had a lot of love for me. But I would ask him like, "Hey, do Asian people have beards? Because some of people I see have full beards." I'm like, he goes, "Not really." I would ask him all these like weird questions about my physical appearance, and I think he knew where I was going with all this question, and he gave me a really dirty look. It's the first time my uncle, after years of just hanging out, gave me a look of disdain. Like, boy, you hate your own people and you think other people are superior to you. I don't know what to do with you.
Mm.
He didn't say that. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he gave me a look and I was like, you just don't get it. You don't get it, right? And so it's a term that we have heard before. You're like, what is it? Like a banana, yellow on the outside, white on the inside, or yeah, white on the inside. You think you're white and you think white is better,
Mm.
and you're looking down on Vietnamese people. And I'm like, and I was doing that. I'm ashamed to admit this part. And the turning point for me, and it's just so sad that I have to say this, is I'm about to graduate from art center, so I'm like 21, 22, and I see during the grad ceremony, it's a very small private art school, women especially dress in their country's clothing,
Mm.
like, whatever the traditional, like a kimono if you're Japanese, or Koreans had their own dress, and they wore it with such pride. And here I am dressed in my suit. I'm like, in high school, you probably get clowned on for this, but here they are walking with like great pride. And I realized something. The Asian Americans that were in school grew up in an ethnocentric country where they were part of the dominant culture. They were affluent enough that their parents could afford to send them to boarding school or to private school elsewhere. So they came from money. So they didn't have the same narrative that I had. I always
Mhm.
felt like the outsider, and I was made to feel like that in many instances. So seeing that, I was like, oh my gosh. So if my story were different, I would have a totally different attitude. And it kind of like, I don't know if I had a big emotional moment, but that moment stuck out of me. And it's like, I need to have a different relationship with myself. And that's when I started to do that self work. Like, man, I'm good. There's merit to what I do. And I have to stop treating myself like less than.
Mm.
Because
Mm.
here, when we have something to compete on, I can compete with the best in the class, maybe in the world at some point. And I knew I was good at something. And I was
Mm.
able to rebuild my identity from the point of view of a graphic designer.
Mm. You're talking about this idea of that self-reflection and then the reframing of that experience. And I think for so many of us, we don't even realize how much internalized racism we took on. I mean, you grew up in Kansas City, then you San Jose. So a lot of the people on this call also grew up in predominantly white neighborhoods. And, we're obviously from a physical standpoint different. So that internalized racism, now that we're older, we have an opportunity to explore that and to like unpack it. But I think one of the things that you realized was, okay, I have to have a different story. I have to speak a different story to myself about myself. And I think one of the things that this is probably, well, at least for me, why I resonate with the things that you share on YouTube and everything is because it is that. It's like you need someone or something to believe in you to kickstart a different story that you're telling yourself, the way that you market yourself out there, the way that you show up. What are some of like the things that maybe you've learned along the way that you could help offer the people who are on this call today or anybody watching the replay in regards to like some, you know, things that were really helpful for you to reframe, and maybe it'll spark something for someone watching this right now?
Okay, let's try to do this and hold me accountable here if I'm
Yeah.
not being clear, okay? Or you don't like the answer, you just push back. I'm good with that, okay?
Oh, I know you push back on other people too, so
Yeah, so please feel free. This is
yeah.
open invitation,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
Number one is when we don't have anything to focus on, we'll focus on all the dark stuff inside our brain. So I think having something to work on other than your dark thoughts, your inner critical voice, and you're amplifying it either from others or from your own parents, which is they mean well, but they just didn't know how to deal with us, right? So for me, it was just giving myself something to do, design, finding and pouring myself into the work and finding some kind of objective measure, because a lot of this objectively speaking, like, oh, I'm not as handsome or I'm not as pretty or I'm not as talented, all those things we can't measure. But all of a sudden I start doing design work and we can see the teachers like noting things that I'm doing well. Other students, my classmates, were coming up to me and saying, hey, can you critique our work? I was like, I'm a student with you. Why would I? What? And so I would try to help them. And so what I was noticing about myself was I was seeing skill where I didn't know something existed. I was seeing maybe my ability to connect dots that I didn't have an opportunity to apply before. And in a structured environment with a great teacher and other students, I'm starting to grow really fast. So I'm going to quiet the narrative of like, you're different, you're weird, you don't belong, toward the narrative of, man, you're really good at something and you're moving much faster than your classmates. And general rule in life, when you find success and something good happens, do more of that. Some people like are successful at playing some sport or an instrument and they're like, nah, I don't want to do that anymore. Okay. So what we have to do is we have to retrain our brain to start to fall in love with ourselves, the way
Mhm,
we are and what we're capable of doing. And it takes a while for that story, that narrative to replace the old one.
mhm,
This is a critical part. So from first term to about third term, 3 semesters in, I'm like, man, I am pretty good at this. And now I just don't want to belong. I want to be the best of my classmates, not something that I had previously desired ever to become. Because high school was just like, I got to get through this thing. I have to suffer through classes I don't want. I have to like partner up with jerks for like my lab mate, someone who's not going to do the work, who's just going to ride my coattails and just turn in the same assignment. Now I was in control. So for
mhm.
me, college was a really important period of personal development. So whether you believe in formal education or not, you need time away to find yourself, however you find yourself. And for me, that was it. I spent a lot of time just like going to the library, to the computer lab, talking to upperclassmen about what they were doing, what teachers inspired them, and seeing what they were doing, and just keep working on that.
Yeah. And when you were talking about whether or not someone likes education, I know you're a parent. How old are your kiddos now?
They're not kids
Yeah,
anymore.
they're
I
not
keep
kids.
calling them
They're
kids,
yeah.
but my kids are 21 and 18.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And you were encouraging them that they didn't need to follow the linear trajectory. Like one of your
Yes.
kids wanted to go to art school, and you were like, no,
Yes.
no, you're going to go live some life. And why do you feel like living that life is important? Because I think, again, for so many of us, we were shown like one linear trajectory that you could follow, maybe like a slight deviation on that. But what have you learned from like, doing it unconventionally or just bucking the whole school system, as a whole?
Yeah. Now, for context, we're now in pretty affluent communities where there's a certain mindset and there's a certain level of competition that exists. And, oh, you're not going to that school, a little snottiness, right? And I want to put that out there for context. So
Yeah.
my kids have, for the most part, either have been mostly or completely in a private school system. I grew up in public school where it's rough. It's rough in the streets, you know? Here they're like looked after and people are attuned to their emotional well-being and things of that nature, and everyone is kind for the most part. And my wife and I did the very responsible thing. When the kids were born, we put away a college fund, and so we overfunded it so they're both ready to go. So by the time they're 18, we have the money. And we decided to do something very different. And so when I tell the parents in our neighborhood what we're doing, they're just shocked. They're just like, "Why would you do this? You're such a rebel." I'm like, "Am I? Or maybe you're just following the program and the program isn't actually good for you or your children." So I've tried to bribe both of my children to drop out of school, to give them the entire tuition to do whatever it is they want, however they want, on whatever schedule they want, saying that by the end of this, when the money runs out, you have to figure out your life. I
Mm.
could not convince either one of them to drop out of school. It's kind of wild. I have a story to share with you.
Yeah.
My cousin, who's the same age as me, he started a family much later, so his child is quite young. And he's like, "Man, your kids are so good. They do things and they're so responsible. Let me ask you this question. How do you get them to do their homework?" And I turned to him. I said, "I don't know. I've never asked them to do their homework. I've never checked on their homework. I don't even care if they do their own homework." And his mind was like blown because this is anti everything that we know of from typical Asian parents, right? I don't check their report cards. I don't have parent teacher conferences unless somebody's in trouble and they're not in trouble. And the reason why this is so important to me is I was told to do well at school. That was someone else's goal. It wasn't mine. So if I did it, which I did not do, I would resent them for telling me
Mhm.
to do this. My children have had the opportunity to choose what they wanted to do at all facets and all decisions. Like, you don't want to go here, we'll take you out. You want to go somewhere else, we'll take you here. Wherever you want to go, whatever you want to do, it's up to you. Now, we have to be a little bit careful because sometimes kids, when they're really young, don't make great decisions. So we advise, but at the end of the day, I'd always say, I strongly encourage you to do this, but at the end of the day, it's your choice. And there was one big moment when it could have been this school or that school, and luckily my son listened to me. And afterwards, like first semester, he's like, "God, that's, oh my God, I'm so glad I listened to you." I'm like, "Boy, sometimes I know a thing or two. If you listen more, you can save yourself some pain, but I don't want to save you from all pain because pain's a good teacher." And so
Mhm.
that's kind of our approach to it. Like, it's too much to expect kids by the time they're 18 to like know what they're supposed to do in
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And if they're learning the humanities, which is my oldest, it's like, are you better off like living in Europe or Japan
Mhm.
or somewhere and taking a pottery or philosophy class with someone you really admire, the person who
Mhm.
wrote the book that you want, that you love, rather than going to a school where everyone's kind of asked to do the same thing? So they're
Mhm.
both thinking about it, even though one's about to graduate pretty soon.
Mhm. Can I ask you a question that's going to be like a total maybe out of left field? But since this whole thing is about variations of love, and I think that for a lot of us here, we didn't really have models of people who really enjoyed themselves, maybe, or enjoyed each other's company, perhaps. And then they were in a lot of survival modes. Like a lot of us, we had immigrant parents who came over and were doing the best that they could with what they had. And so I'm curious about you and your relationship with your wife. Like, what are some of the things that worked really well for you guys to build your relationship? Because I think that's another thing we don't really talk about. Like, if you don't have that as a model, you don't know. And I know you've shared in different interviews that you were lucky that along the way you had some people who really either believed in you, gave you an option, guided you along the way. So, can you share anything there in regards to like relationships?
Yeah, but I'm not a great person to do this, but I'll share what little I know. I just kind of put that out the disclaimer,
Yeah.
okay? So my wife's from Taiwan.
Mm,
My wife has a very different upbringing than me. Her father is a commercial pilot,
mm,
so he's well traveled. He's they're upper class folks, and they don't have the same challenges. Then she's living in a country where everybody looks and sounds like her, an all girls school here and there. So she's not dealing with the kind of nonsense I got to deal with. We meet at Art Center, and at
mm,
first we're friends, and I watch her go through many relationships, and eventually I'm like, maybe I'm missing something here and I need to get in on this myself, right? So reluctantly, she decides to date me and we're like going to try to make this work. Now, in our relationship over the last, I guess it's coming up on 30 years here almost, um, in terms of our marriage, in that we have had many ups and downs. And I think the first 5 years are very important to kind of
mm,
figure out if we're going to make it or break it.
Mm,
My general rule with folks is maintaining a relationship with someone is very, very difficult. Do not compound that by adding financial stress or raising kids. So we
mm,
waited a long time and we had children quite late, uh, relatively speaking, because we wanted to make sure our marriage was really stable, that financially we're going to be okay to take care of ourselves and our children, to be able to provide for them. And we're not going to compound the problem by multiplying the number of people we have to deal with. And so that first year was not first year. The first 5 years was kind of rough finding our rhythm.
mm,
And luckily, she's a designer. I am too. We worked together in the business. We had natural conflict when it came to running the business and also different design decisions. But I think what made the company great was the fact that we could speak the same language.
mm,
So and for me, what was really important, because I was very clear about who I wanted in my life. She wasn't as clear, and she said she was clear, but she wasn't that clear. I wanted a person who I could admire, who had a
mm,
great sense of humor, who we had personal interest in. Because for me, I don't want to grow old with someone where we look at something, I'm laughing my head off, and I turn over and they're like straight face, right? I'm like,
mm,
do we get the same thing? So we would play video games together, we'd watch movies. And even though she doesn't have the same American pop culture references, she could understand the humor. Like
mm,
maybe not every nuance of it, but she's laughing as loud as I am. And so
mm,
that gets you through a lot of rough patches.
mm,
So my best advice to folks is you have to work on the relationship. And we have done very formal things, and she doesn't like this, but I'm like, I need a scheduled time in which we're going to go out and have dinner just for us. She
mhm.
goes, we should just call an audible. I'm like, it's not going to work. So you'll
Yeah,
do something, I'll do something, the kids will want something, and it just never works.
yeah.
And there's a weird structured component to it that was really like oddly satisfying to me. And
Mm,
then
mm,
we went to see a family therapist to see how we can strengthen our relationship. I'm trying to invest in that. Now, I
mm,
will disclose this part. I'm not the perfect partner because I like to do lots of things myself. And if your partner really wants you to spend a lot of time with them, I'm horrible as a partner, right? I really am. And so it's like it was important for me to find someone who had their own identity, who had their own hobbies and interests and things they wanted to do. And we would make each other stronger where we overlapped, but we had our own lives. And so that was a big adjustment period for my wife and I, where a lot of times, and this happens in a lot of relationships, where her whole sense of joy and happiness and belonging was centered around where I was.
mm,
That created a lot of pressure for me. It's like, I have things I got to do. I
mm,
have demons and dragons I have to slay. And there's things I need to shield you from because it's not a pretty world out there when you're selling creative services. And
mm,
so that was a tightrope act.
mm. Thank you so much for sharing that. You are talking about business now, and we've talked about before in this community about how some people, the pressure from the parents or any elder in their lives is so strong, and the fear of disappointment is so strong that they will forego the things that they actually want to do to make someone else happy, to knowing the sacrifices that they may have made. And Misa, the founder of this community, has even shared like she's onboarded some people who said, I'm just waiting for my parents to die before I can go pursue the things that I want to do, or, some to that extreme. And for you, I know that for me, like that would feel like I was suffocating and I couldn't be able to function like that. But not everybody is like that. Not everybody's going to buck the convention. What are some of the things that you've experienced that you could help someone else who might be, wanting to lean into this more, wanting to figure out professionally what makes them happy, or even just as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, you were talking about like selling yourself. That's not always easy. And then like raising your rates and all of those kind of things. So could you share about that?
Yeah. What a sad sentiment. I mean, I don't want anyone to wait for anyone to die.
Yeah, right.
What a way to live. Like friends, or like I'm waiting for my plant to die or my dog.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to wait for anything to die.
Yeah.
That's a really dark place to be, but I understand that sentiment really
Mm.
well, because fear of disappointment. And here's what I have to say. And I might get into some hot water for saying this, okay? Because I know this is a community of women, okay?
Go for it.
I think sometimes, whatever gender you are, you're if your happiness comes from controlling others, like we got
Mm,
to do some self work.
mhm,
Like
mhm,
a conversation we have a lot at our house is like, everybody gets to be who they want to be in this life. And I want to be who I want to be in this life. And I don't want to live for someone else. And if we share the same things, then let's hang out. If we don't, that's okay too.
mhm,
And it's this sense of control. And I see it a lot, unfortunately, in Asian American women or just
mhm,
Asian women in general. Like, I watch my wife's mom, my mother-in-law, who's an incredible lady to me, trying to tell all her daughters what to do all the time.
mhm,
And quite literally, like one of my sister-in-law, she is a surgeon,
mm,
and her mom, who I think only has like a high school based education, is advising her daughter, who's brilliant, on what she should be doing with her career. I'm like,
mhm,
on what authority do you have to do this? And the thing that is hard for me to watch is, why do they toe the line?
mm, mm,
They still follow in order. It's like, we got to do this because mom said so. I'm like, no, you don't.
mhm,
I don't do any of this stuff. And maybe as a boy, maybe as a middle child, and I want to put those two things out there, and possibly because my brother had to shield me from all that and he took the brunt of it. But the weird thing is, my older brother is doing exactly what he was meant to do in this life.
mm,
You know, when we were younger, he was taking apart electronics and rebuilding things and making new devices. And
mm,
I just like, how do you even know how to do that? So he
mm,
winds up being a software engineer in Silicon Valley and doing really well. So I think he's still doing what he wants to do,
mhm,
as both of my siblings have been doing. So I think it's one of the best gifts that my parents gave us, which is they were busy at work. We were latchkey kids,
mhm,
and they have this kind of laissez-faire attitude towards telling us what to do. Now, they had
mhm,
strong feelings, but they didn't often vocalize them. And so one of the two parents would always either block the other one from telling us what to do, or was acting as good interference or shield and counter programming some of that talk, which gave
mm,
us space to do this. So my older brother's a software engineer. I'm a designer. My younger brother is a visual effects artist, and we all have different degrees of education and different degrees of success, but we're all living our own lives.
mm,
But I see this too. I see this sometimes where my wife, who I love very much, she tries to tell the boys what to do, or she's like, "Did you do this? Did you check on that?" I'm like, "Hun, just let him f up. Who cares?" And she goes, "Yeah, why am I doing this? It's stressful for me." It's stressful for all of us. It really is, right? And it's wild. So let me give you an example, okay? Every once in a while, my boys and I are able to travel, just the three of us. It's like a boys' trip, and when I travel, we're like overseas somewhere in a foreign place. We just got back from a multi-city trip, so we were in Japan, we're in Vietnam, and we're in Dubai.
mm,
And my wife is like, when we got back home, she's like, "What happened? What happened? Tell me." I'm like, "Great. Here's what happened." I said, "We effed up a lot. The boys learned things. The boys impressed me. They took charge of things. They would figure out the train schedule. They would download apps to translate languages they didn't understand. And was it the best? No, but I didn't care. I wanted to see them become men and take responsibility. And we would have conversations about it, like, yeah, I think we overpaid for this hotel, right? Well, why don't we look at this next time? Cool, fine. And so they were looking after me versus me looking after them.
mm,
And she goes, so unfair life. They complain to me all the time. They're looking to me to program everything for the day. And they're taking care of you and they're figuring out what to do. I said, yeah, babe, it's because you want to control what's going on. You don't think it's control, but we're going to go here, we're going to go here, and then we have free time here. Everything is scheduled. For me, I had to wake up and like, what are we doing? Your job is to figure out where we're going to eat today. If it takes a long time, we'll just be hungry.
mm,
Okay. And if you pick a poor place, we'll suffer the consequence. So
mm,
do whatever diligence you need to do. And you'll pick one, and I'll pick one.
mm.
And turns out I always pick the best ones. And I'm like, here's what I'm doing.
Yeah,
But you pick the next one, you pick the next one. And eventually they're like, Dad, we need to do what you're doing. I'm like, yeah, because I have some life experience.
yeah.
I'm not going to control the outcome. We got dumped off on a train in the middle of Japan somewhere in the coldest of winter, like snow is falling, and we're scared that no cabs are running now because it's like
Mm,
11 o'clock at night. So my whole thing is, let's figure this thing out. What did you guys plan? So where my
mm,
wife would need to know, where are we exiting? Are we on the right train? Who's picking us up? And how is this going to work? Now she's doing the smart thing. We're doing dumb guy things. We're just gonna follow like wherever the wind takes us. And if we have to sleep at the train station, it'll be a wild story to share one day.
Mm.
Luckily, it didn't work out that way, but I was prepared for that.
I think that, while you were talking, I was thinking about that idea of we teach people how to treat us and
Yes,
how to respect us. And
yes.
so part of what you were saying is like, there is a tendency for us to pattern certain things, which then that person will respond in that way. And if you release the control, I love what you said too, of like, who cares? Like at the end of the day, who cares? Like, what's the big deal? And we get to live this one life. So many of things become great stories afterwards when in the moment they are not so great, but there's such character development and so much of that. And I think in the chat, it was like, don't tell an Asian woman we're trying to control everything. But I think also I had a therapist say, like, don't play that Asian woman martyr figure. Like that's old and it's played out and you don't need to do that. You don't need to keep sacrificing all of yourself for somebody else's happiness because your happiness is your own responsibility. Your contentment and, we all have onus and control, and there is a way to respect someone else's model of the world without having to jump into it and without having to like adhere to it because everybody else, I mean, they have their lived experiences, they have their life lessons. We can respect that. We don't need to like necessarily engage and like fall into that.
Yeah, it manifests itself in strange ways. Okay, I'll give
Mm,
you an example. Like, I want to say for the record too, most of the people who run my business are women
mm.
because it's that kind of like control and attention to detail that I need in my business. I just don't need in my life, right? So my head of business, her name's Amy. She's been with us for over 10 years, and she's literally like, Chris, are you on the train? How did the people treat you? Did they ask you to do this? Because we negotiated that contract for them. So she's like on top of it. And my own kids are like, Amy's the goat. She's goated, right? Because she took care of their travel. She's like, all your customs and your visas are filled out. Where we're like so dumb, we're like, well, I don't know, do we need a visa? Do we need to apply for stuff? And we would probably get rejected at the airport. So that level of programming and anticipating what the next steps are is useful in some areas. And to me, I don't think it's a surprise. Like when I was running my production company, most of the producers that we knew that we worked with were all women.
Mm, mhm.
It's very few dudes because dudes are super sloppy. They're really sloppy. And I'm like, oh, did we get paid? What happened here? Did the contracts get signed? So there are not good and bad, but there's usefulness and not useful, right? Now, I'll give you an example. My wife initiated some people to repair the pool because it's leaking. I don't know the first thing about pool and plumbing and leaks and whatever they're going to do. I have no idea what they're doing. So when she was away, I was going to manage the contractors. And literally, she's like, I need you to work at the desk where you can watch them. I'm like, okay. So I brought my laptop up there. I'm like, I don't know what I'm looking for. People move around, ditches are being dug, and plumbing is moving around. I'm like, I just need to know when they're going to be here and when they're going if they need something. So
Mhm.
to appease my wife, I would go out there every couple hours, like, yo, you guys all right? I'm like, what do you need? Any decisions? Like, no. I'm like, oh, you're going to do that? Okay, all right. And I have to report to her, like, here's what's going on, right? So it manifests itself in little things like, are they putting the plumbing in the right spot? I'm like, I don't know. Last time I checked, you don't have any experience doing this either. So it's one of these things where this idea of like common sense knowledge is
Yeah.
actually not sensible at all.
Yeah.
Just like how my mother-in-law is telling her surgeon daughter
Mm.
how to be a better surgeon. It makes no freaking sense to me.
Mm.
So
Mm.
as a person who wants to stay happily married, I just smile. I'm like, okay, you want me to do that? Okay. Well, so what are we doing here? And then I have to take a lot of pictures and send it to her. And like, why did they dig the ditch there? I'm like, because they're ditchologists and I'm not one. I do not know. I have no idea.
Oh.
So there's that level of control or management that maybe makes you feel safe,
Mm.
but I swear, like, I don't know. I don't
Mm.
know. I
Mm.
had some dental work done there. Like, did they do this? I'm like, my mouth is open. That's all I know. That's all I know, babe.
Oh. Oh my God. I love that you're saying that about that sense of control, because I think for so many of us, if you grew up in a chaotic environment or if the people around you were just trying to navigate, I mean, like I've lived in the countries that my parents emigrated from, and that being my second language, because I'm not a native speaker per se, since I grew up in the United States, I can imagine how hard that would be. And you're raising a family and like trying to figure all of that out. But I think one of the things that I've been encouraging all of my clients to understand is like the universe is not a controlled space. It's actually constantly expanding. There's all this chaos that's happening all of the time, and it leads to incredible opportunities. But we are like miniature universes. And so if we understand that that's just the nature of how the universe works, the more that we can embrace that and like embrace like there is going to be chaos and things that we can't control. And yet the more that we work on ourselves, the more that we can navigate the response to that situation. And I think that that is the most important thing, is to be able to have that confidence inside
Yeah.
and that understanding.
So I have a theory about this, and you help me
Yeah.
out with this, Judy,
Yeah.
okay? I
Yeah.
know there's all women here, they're like got the knives out, and I'm like, okay, ladies, I'll give you a chance. You all stab me once, and we'll deal with this later, okay? So here, I have a crazy theory
Yeah.
that some people live vicariously through others,
Mm.
and you don't control the things that you can control, like how you show up in the world, your temperament,
Mm.
what you eat, and how you use energy. So you then tell your children what to do. You shouldn't be
Mhm.
eating that. I'm like, but
Mhm.
what? There's
Mhm.
sets of rules here, right? Because we're in such a mess, it's much easier for us to tell other people what to do. And it's
Mhm.
kind of wild, right? So my whole thing is, and I tell my wife, honey, you're hard when you need to be soft, and you're soft when you need to be hard.
Mm.
What do I mean by that? So she's like on the boys about things I just think are just not important. But when they're spending money like crazy, I'm like, where's that control? Like, what the hell? Y'all just spending money like it freaking rains from the freaking sky. Let's exercise the control here. But if the kid messes up or tries something that didn't work out, let's just chill out. So I try and find that balance. And I'll tell you a little story, okay? Just to add to the hate factor, right? I work a lot. I come home one day and my wife's in the kitchen and she don't look super happy. I'm like, oh fudge, what did I do? I just came home. It's like 8 p.m. I'm tired. What the heck? So she said, did you see this? I'm like, how could? No, I did not see this. So she pushes an envelope across the kitchen countertop and on the island. I'm like, ugh, did I spend something? Did I do something? I open it up. I'm like, what is this? And it's a progress report
Mm.
for my oldest son, who's a high achieving, super bright, like top 1 percentile in terms of intelligence. He decided to take Latin,
Mm.
and the report was terrible. And I can't remember exactly, but it was like 8, right? I'm like, 8? What does that mean, babe? 8 out of 10? That's not so bad. She goes, no, it was 8 out of 100. I'm like, oh my God, that is really bad. 8 out of 100? And she was fuming. I
Mm.
want you to visualize this, everybody. If you could see steam, it would be coming out of her ears. And I'm like, why are you so upset? She goes, because I asked him earlier how he's doing, and he goes, fine. He just dismissed me like that. And so
Mm.
there was the reality in how he just processed that. And I was thinking, oh my God. So I said, what do you want me to do? He goes, you need to talk to him. I'm like, fudge. I'm never around. I'm working all the time. And the one time dad's around is like raining down the hammer on my son. That don't feel right. So you know what I was thinking, Judy? Just like, use your brain, talk your way out of this one. Use your freaking brain. You negotiate all day long, negotiate something with your wife. So quickly, I flipped a switch. I said, babe, that is a horrible score. But you know what? I've taken Latin before and it's really hard. And I dropped out. Have you taken Latin before? She goes, no. I said, so he got 8 right on a test. She goes, yeah. That's 8 more than you and I would get right. We would get 0. In fact, we wouldn't even be in the class. And she goes, okay. I said, is it important for you that he does well in school? She goes, not really. I mean, look at us. We're 2 F ups. We went to design school. And he elected to choose Latin to be a better student. He could have chosen Spanish, which he was already learning. Pretty
Mm.
easy for him. So I would hate for us to punish him for doing something that was much harder.
Mm.
And I don't want to discourage our children to try things that are hard. And that's what I would be doing if I went up there and rained hell on him. As
Yeah.
mad as I am, I wouldn't want to do that. Do you want me to do that? And like now, shoulder sunken. She's chill. She went from DEFCON 5 to like 0. The hand on the nuclear button got moved away. You know, the safety switch, everything's turned off. And she goes, no. I said, okay. Well, I'll go upstairs and I'll talk to him. Took a breath. I went upstairs. I knocked on his door. I'm like, hey, buddy. He goes, yeah, what's up, Dad? I said, how you doing in Latin? Because I'm trying. I said, good job. Keep it up.
Mm.
And I walked out.
Mm.
Here's the cool thing. He wasn't doing well in that class because his teacher sucked.
Mm.
He got a different teacher scoring 100.
Mm.
And then he kept doing Latin for a while and he continued on. And I was like, this is amazing. Eventually he stops taking it at his own pace and his own decision. But let's look at, I often refer to this movie, Sliding Doors, horrible movie, Gwyneth Paltrow, right?
Mm.
And like she misses the train and her life changes. And in one instance, she catches the train. And I was like, that was a sliding doors moment. And in
Mm.
fact, our lives are filled with sliding door moments where I come upstairs, I rain hell on him. He feels bad about himself. His esteem takes a hit. He wants to drop out. He wants to give up. He never excels at Latin because the teacher he got the next go around writes this amazing note. His son's
Mm.
doing amazing. He's just crushing Latin right now.
Mm.
And those are the 2 points. And I go with the old Asian dogma of this is how we handle things like this. Or I'm like, you know what? It's a new world. It's a new life. We don't have to follow any rule that we were given. And I
Mm.
could feel a little bit of my dad's voice inside my head when my wife showed me and told me what was going on. Like, this is really bad. It's like punishment time, right? But I just shut that voice in my head up. I'm like, no, I don't even care.
Mm.
I don't care. Latin's hard, man. So there you go.
That's amazing. I love that story. I think it's also demonstrating like we don't always have all the information. I mean, like you didn't know that the teacher at that moment wasn't a great teacher until he switched into another teacher.
Yeah.
And I think if we can just ask like what else am I missing in this moment? Like what other information could I be getting? And I think something else that you alluded to is whenever we don't feel organized on the inside, we try to organize everything else on the outside. And the more that we can get organized on the inside, the less that that becomes a factor, the more that we can let things like roll off. I'm curious. I want to leave like 10 minutes for Q&A. So if anybody has questions, please pop them into the chat, or you can also take yourself off the mute and video when you're ready, when we're ready. And I want to ask you, you know, you're at the forefront of a lot of trends of business, of, you know, best practices when it comes to people who are high achieving and high performing. And I've listened to different interviews that you've had with people who did not have the same starting point, and they weren't great starting points that they had, but they were still able to create great success. So as we're looking forward in 2025 and you have this life lived experience, I know I was just watching an interview where someone was like, you're young, you don't know what you're talking about. You're like, I'm 51. Like, you know, I know what I'm talking about. So you've lived
Bruh.
life.
Yeah.
What would you say are some of the things that we can think about as we're like at the cutting edge of humanity right now? We're at the end point of everything that we've known before. The world is continually moving in all sorts of directions. What kinds of things would you impart or are you practicing moving ahead? Are there any things that you have from like a mindset perspective, awareness of, you know, industry perspective?
Okay, there's a couple things, and I want to tie it to our last thread
Yeah,
here, which
yeah.
is the more you know what you don't know. And so when you said we don't have all the information, let's just assume we have no information. Like, why do we assume we know the whole picture? Were you in class? Did you watch
Yeah.
this? Like, why not give the people in our lives the benefit of the doubt? If there are 2 possible outcomes, why don't we just assume the more positive of the 2 and give them the benefit of the doubt until we have better information, not to trust people before we condemn them or to judge them? Like, why don't we just back the F off, right? My whole thing is, I'm an F up. I'm a work in progress myself. who the heck am I to be judging anybody at any point in their lives? And if someone were to interrupt me in my process, in my growth, a totally different outcome would have happened. So if you stopped me right after high school, you would have said, this guy's a loser. He's not going to amount to anything. And you would have been right. And if you saw me in the community college when I was still not mature enough, not focused enough, you're like, this guy's a loser. And I would agree with you. And then if you stopped me after I got out of art center, you say, this guy's a cocky mother effer who's just like his S don't stink. And you would have been right. But the cool thing is, human beings, we have this amazing gift that we can grow and we can change our mind at any time. So instead of focusing on trying to fix other people, to control other people, why don't we fix ourselves? Not that you need to be fixed. Why don't we control the things that we can control? And I have tried in many ways and many styles. I've been completely ineffective at trying to control anybody but me. And I'm barely good enough to do that. Right? So
Samesies.
in the world of all possibilities, like, why do we assume that that was a great teacher and our son's lying to us or anything? Not to say that that's what my wife was thinking, but she's like, results are results. But are they? So we can look at it as like, he missed 92 of the questions. I just chose to look at it. He got 8. He got 8 right. I'm not going to go and scream on the rooftops and go to social media like, my son got 8 out of 100. My God, booyah. What's your son doing? However, I'm like, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And if he doesn't want to do it anymore, I'm good with that too. If he wants to drop out of school, that's fine with me. Like, why, the thing I used to struggle with before I became a parent is, what am I going to do if my child does X, Y, or Z? But that's their life. You got your shot. This is your shot. Work on this time that you have versus trying to like live vicariously through them. I can't take ownership for his accomplishments. I don't also take responsibility for his failures. That's his life. I told both my children, you can be rich, you can be famous, you can be anonymous, and you can be poor. All of it is up to you. Every decision you have has an action and a reaction. It's up to you to decide whatever it is you want from this life.
Thank you. Okay, we do have some questions. Erin, would you like to come off of mute? You said that you have 2 questions.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I cannot contain myself. So, Chris, I'm such a fan. I shared
Aw.
your book, Pocket Full of Dough, on my Instagram, and I got like 30x more engagement on my Instagram more than ever. Next to Jill Turecki, who also had a great book. So thank you for that. I've been following you for such a long time, probably like 8 years when you were still working on, I think, The School Before the Future.
Yes, okay.
And Matthew Encina, I had come on, actually it was my YouTube channel for was nonprofit. I'm converting to a B Corp for Filipino Americans that are working in STEAM fields, so both creative and engineering. And I love your font choices. Thank you, so smart. There's so much great content that you've put out. And so for people who don't know Chris, like I love everything Chris has done for just so many people in the world, especially designers.
Erin, I appreciate it, but let's get to the question.
2 questions.
Thank you. Yeah.
What is
Question 1.
This is a hard one. What is your artistic process? So for creation for business versus enjoyment for yourself? That's the first question. Second
Wait,
question.
one question at a time.
Okay,
So
that's fine.
what is, I thought I understood the question, but there's somewhere, I think you gave me a twist, like
Sure.
in the middle
Your
of the question. What
artistic
is it you want to know?
process for creation for business. So like if you are, say like, for me, I'm a software engineer and computational designer. If you're making something for someone else, right? Like there's a client or I'm building an app for, let's say, a customer, right? I'm working on a productivity app versus what are you creating for yourself for the sake of enjoyment? So
Perfect question. You ready for
Same
this?
thing.
It's not a hard question at all. I believe what we're trying to do in most of our lives is segment things. I'm eating, I'm exercising, I'm learning, I'm reading, I'm playing, I'm spending quality time. And this is how we're taught. This is the model that we try to follow. It's like, you can only do this or that. Like pursuing a career in design was plan B. It was never plan A, right? That's your backup plan, to use Asian parent language. I'm like, no, it's just my thing. I believe you'll be much more fulfilled if you can integrate them versus segment them. I don't see much difference between the things I do for personal enjoyment and the things I get paid handsomely for. And the more those two worlds blend and merge together, the happier I am. I'm a happy boy when that happens, right? Like when I'm I don't know, acting like a jackass, making fun of people, teaching things about entrepreneurship on a stage, and they're laughing at me, they're laughing with me, and we're learning together, and I'm also getting paid handsomely, I feel pretty good. So I think it's like when we start to divide or segment our lives, we live a very fragmented existence, and then you start to resent one or the other. Like, oh, I love my art, but God, no one ever wants to pay me for this. So then the enjoyment from making art feels worse. And then when you're doing like the business creative stuff, you're like, oh, I wish it's more like personal, like my art. I'm just being a corporate, whatever, fill in the blank. I'm just an art prostitute, as my friend would say. Like, well, couldn't we try to bring these together? And I think in the 21st century, given all the changes that have happened in the world, two significant changes have happened in your lifetime, which eclipse everything else that happened before it. Or maybe three things: the splitting of the atom, the invention of the internet, and the invention of AI. What a freaking amazing, great time to be alive. And I saw this on a YouTube video, I think. It's like, just 100 years ago, we did not bathe every day. And people stank. They're ratchet, right? And so they invented perfume to cover up all the smells. And just think, this morning I got into the shower, I turned something on, eventually it got hot. I'm like, I'm taking a hot shower. This was a luxury just 100 years ago, maybe even 70 years ago. And the fact that we have indoor plumbing and toilets, it's like, this is freaking crazy. So we live in this great time. What I'm saying is the world has changed so much, but yet we're still holding on to old ideas. Dogma. I want you to take the dogma out to the back and just put a gun to it and take it out. Live an integrated, fulfilled, passionate, joyful life. And if you make money, great. If you don't, it'll be okay. But you got one spin on this planet, make it count. What's question 2?
How do you view rest and productivity to keep it from becoming toxic? So like if you're achieving scale, right? Like say you're not like the person who invented YouTube, but you're a YouTuber, right? How do you view long-term work that's evergreen? So you're not just feeling like you're beholden to the algorithm. Because I find a lot of my friends are content creators, they burn out. And it's just like, well, I'm constantly responding to things. Like I wrote a book on AR and VR 6 years ago. I'm trying to work on my next one. It's like, well, trying to actually work on a second book that's more evergreen than just to the time. And you've had like such a huge body of work. So I'm curious how you view your rest and your productivity and how you kind of think about the content like in different channels. Like what's very short term and versus what's really long term of like, this is something that my kids will see after I'm gone.
Okay. I have a more philosophical answer to this. And if you don't like it, ask me again and I'll give you more concrete. Okay. I've learned to be in tune with my body. So when I'm tired, I just stop working. I just go take a nap. And my wife's like, don't you have a lot of work to do? I'm like, "Hun, I'm in my good place right now. I know how to manage my schedule. I'm good." She goes, "It stresses me out seeing your schedule." I'm like, "Well, don't look at it. I don't either. So it's okay." Right? If somebody's pinging me and my phone's blowing up, I probably missed a call or a deadline. It's whatever. So I, generally speaking, don't set my alarm clock because I don't need to. I wake up when I feel energized and I go to sleep when I feel tired. So last night I was in bed by 11 o'clock. Now I didn't go to sleep that early, but my wife's like, "It's kind of early for you." I'm like, "I feel tired today. I need to recharge." And sometimes she's like, "You're up so early." I'm like, "Yeah, because I'm excited right now." And so I think this idea that work begins and ends at a certain time that's universally accepted by all people is a stupid idea. Another dogma, right? Just because it's been done doesn't mean that's how. Now, there's a reason why, because for the most part in humanity's existence, we needed to regulate our schedule around when the sun came up and when it went down. But we have this thing, it's called electricity. And you can do whatever you want. And you can control your own schedule. So I just try to listen to my body. And when I'm feeling like achy, it's because I haven't moved enough. So I'm gonna go to the gym. I'm gonna go for a walk. If I have a headache, it's probably because I need more water or I need to do something and I'm feeling tense. Well, step away from the machine. Recenter yourself, recalibrate. Now, let's talk about the algorithm. You made a YouTube video. I don't think you were thinking about legacy. I don't think you're thinking about evergreen. And at the first part, you probably weren't even thinking about the algorithm. But you got caught up in the machine and the system. And then you started to buy into all this stuff. I hate to say this, but I don't give a flying F who watches our videos. I care if it's a good video. And the good video isn't determined by how many likes or positive comments that I get, how many attaboys I get. I'm just like, did I do a good job of communicating what I want? Did I conduct myself well in this moment? Right? And I was watching some videos that the team put together where I was at Adobe Max. I'm like, who's this angry a-hole that's talking? Oh, that's me. I'm not even angry, but because it's such a loud environment, I'm yelling into the microphone. So even just like me perceiving my own energy, I'm like, I don't like that energy at all, guys. We have to figure out how I can do this. I need quiet space to do my best thinking. And when I'm able to talk in a tone that feels right for the occasion, I think people can feel that energy and they can connect a lot more. And so I don't create content for that. And I am as energized today, 1,800 plus videos into our YouTube channel, 10 years in, as I was on day one. In fact, I'm actually more excited because I just don't care. And the funny thing is, the less I care about what people think, the more they care about what I think. Right? It's like you could be a creator, an influencer, or you can be a follower. All are fine. There's no judgment on each, but you can't be a creator influencer when you're trying to follow what the algorithm is saying. Now, it's important that your message gets heard by people. So you follow some best practices. And other than that, because you don't want to self-sabotage there, do it because of you. I don't care about my legacy because you know why? When I'm dead, I won't even know. I care about the impact I'm making today on every single day. That's all I can do. Is that okay, Aaron?
Great response. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. We do have one more question I want to acknowledge. It is like at the top of the hour. So I know if you need to drop, you can drop there. And thank you, Chris, if you don't mind us asking you one more question.
Sure.
All right.
I'm good.
Okay, good. Abby, why don't you go ahead? And then
Then I have a question for your group.
Okay. And then we always take a photo too. So if you don't mind doing that, but go for it, Abby.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you.
Yeah, really nice to meet you. So my name is Abby. I'm based in the greater Seattle area of Washington. I am the first product manager hired at a startup, and I'm also the founder of a company called The Network, which helps students who feel held back by their location and their income and their school achieve a top 1% career. And my question is, what do most rising content creators get wrong about building a personal brand, and how do they really just make that like their full-time career?
Okay. There are two schools of thought on this, and you'll know really soon which school of thought I'm in. One school of thought looks at personal branding as a means to an end. They're trying to achieve something. They're trying to get more people in their courses or buy more of their products or downloads or do whatever it is they need to do. And they're trying to leverage this. And it's been co-opted by, I think, salespeople and marketers. And they say like marketers ruin everything that's good. And I think we're at that stage where everyone thinks personal branding is about like how you title your LinkedIn profile and if your headshot looks good enough or whatever. And it just makes me want to vomit. It really does, because a personal brand is about being meaningfully different. It's not about what you do, it's about who you are. So now we've created this divide. And I don't think the divide is in the middle. The divide is 99% says this other thing and 1% says this other thing. You'll figure out which is which, right? I was intrigued because I saw an article cover for Harvard Business Review, right? On personal branding. And I'm sad to say this, but on Reddit, I'm like, you guys don't know what you're talking about at all. This is like resume building. That's not your personal brand.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing? This doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And I'm going to say this, and I've said it in a couple of different conversations before, and it seems to strike a nerve in people. If my personal brand is about who I am, not what I do, then the biggest question I have is, well, who the hell am I? And this is not an easy question to answer. Who are you? What's important to you? What are your core values and beliefs? What is your story? What is your origin story, the inciting incident and your defining moment story? These are all things I'm trying to help people figure out. Because in this world, when we're living in a time of abundance, abundant choice, we don't
Yeah.
choose things that are technically better, that have more features. We choose things that connect with us as a person.
Mm.
There's countless thought leaders out there that offer pretty much the same advice. I put myself in the same bucket. I'm not telling you something you've never heard before. All I can do is to tell you it in my voice, like literally my voice, the way it sounds, and my
Yeah.
voice and my style and my lens into the world. So personal branding doesn't need to be difficult.
No.
It
Yeah.
doesn't. So there's this thing. I have a graphic of it somewhere. I don't have it handy to show you, but I wrote on the board. It says the most important thing in your personal brand is these three letters: YOU. When I don't see you in your personal brand, you're doing what the 99% does. And
Wow.
then the other part to it is if you can see the letters horizontally, YOU, right? Vertically, you have to have a point of view, POV. So who are you? What is your story? And what is your lens into the world? Because all I can do is I can answer the same question. Like, let's line up 100 people and we can hear what everybody says. And you ask each person who's a quote unquote expert on personal branding, what is personal branding? How do you define it? What are examples? You'd get 100 different answers, hopefully. But truthfully, what's going to happen is a good majority of them are going to regurgitate the same BS information without their lens, without their voice, without their style. And all I can do right now is to bring as much style, personality, and perspective into what it is I'm going to say, because that's the only thing that's going to be different.
Exactly. Wow, you just motivated me to post Instagram Reels again. So thank you, Chris.
Let's go, girl. Let's do this. Because no one's going to find
When I
out
have a
about
million
you.
followers next year, it'll be because of you. So
Wait, what's the goal for next year?
I want a million,
Woo!
I want to reach by
You're
next.
gonna shoot past me because I'm stuck at 960 or 990.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's cool. Smoke me. It's good. To
Okay.
motivate the old man.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the questions. What was the question you had for everyone here?
Oh yeah. So do we need to take our picture first, or should I?
Oh yeah, let's take the picture
Let's take
first.
it first.
Yes.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Thank
Let's
you.
do that.
Okay, I'm gonna wait
Cameras
for
on,
everybody to come
everybody.
in. Yay! So many people. It's amazing. Okay.
Okay. How is there a count? Because
Thanks
I
so
don't want to get like
much.
weird faced on you, right?
Everybody's blinking. Okay, I think everybody's here. Okay, I'm gonna start. 3, 2, 1. Got it. Perfect. Okay, that's good.
You're
Yay,
so
thank you,
good.
everybody.
Okay.
All right. What is
I
your
want the question I want to ask you: a room full of Asian women. Did I do something to piss you off? If I did, let's talk. I don't have a ton of time, but I'd like to address some unresolved, unspoken objections. So if I made you upset, let's talk about it and say, Chris, you donkey, let's clarify some things, okay?
And I also want to say, please, I know that for a lot of us, speaking up, asking the question, all of those things were, nerve-wracking for most of our lives, but please go ahead and do the thing, like do it differently. So anybody have something to say to Chris? Someone
No,
said
it was
that,
amazing. Thank you.
yeah.
I just want to hear from some haters.
I know, I'm like,
I'll
you were
go.
real, so I'm okay.
I mean,
I'll
because,
go.
okay, go ahead.
Hi, Chris. I'm also a loud introvert, big fan. Recently, I have been kind of grappling with this idea that like I need to stop taking advice from men. And part of it is just because some of the things that men can do and the resources they have access to isn't available to us women. And so I can absolutely empathize with your wife and the way that she wants to control what your sons do or don't do. I also totally understand your perspective and I agree with it. I'm also a parent. I'm a proud mother of a 14-month-old. And I absolutely believe that it is her life. And the only thing I ask from her is to not ask me for money when she turns 18. So you can do whatever you want, just don't ask me for money. But at the same time, I wonder, like Chris, your example of taking a nap when you need to feel energized again. But I also know your story about like when you started out. I remember you saying over and over in your videos, like, I worked like a dog.
I still
And
work
so
like
I
a dog.
wonder if you would, if that younger Chris would take the advice of current Chris now, or would you say F off and I'm just gonna keep working?
I think younger Chris would take the advice of older Chris because I'm, by my own coach's description, his best student. I'm highly coachable. And people wonder this about me all the time. And they're just shocked to hear the kinds of ways I make decisions. Okay. But what I wasn't sure about is what you hate me for. You can't come on the call and say, I'm a big fan. By the way, I hate you. And
No,
like, wait, one of these
I
two
never
statements
said
is not true. I
I
know.
never
I was
said I
asking for
hated
somebody who's
you.
upset. Let's talk about the one thing. I think you opened up many doors and I want to talk to you if we have time. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's go.
The first thing is you're like, I don't want women to take advice from men.
No. I'm
Oh.
saying I think women, as a woman, I need to be just more thoughtful about the advice that I take from men. Because, like, for example, Simon Sinek, Adam Grant, like, love those guys, read all their books, I listen to their podcasts. And before, I used to just take what they say and I'm like, yes, I'm going to apply this to my business. I'm going to apply this to my life. And some of it worked. But then when it wasn't working, I was like, what am I doing wrong? And I realized that in some cases, like I don't think I can really apply those things because of the different societal pressures on me as a woman and as a mother. And so when I heard you share some of the things comparing like how you perceive things with how you parent versus how your wife parents, I I just didn't agree with like just how you can, for example, your travel, you traveling with your sons, there was nothing at stake. Your sons could mess up, but it didn't matter. There was nothing at stake.
Okay, let's
But
do
at
this. It's
home
getting
every
hot now.
day,
All right, you're getting the sauce.
but at home every day, there's a
Okay.
lot more at stake at school, at home.
Well, so we think let's have a robust conversation about this, okay? Number one is I try not to consider too much the source of good information. Like if it's a good piece of advice, I don't care if it's from a child, an old person, gay, straight, white, whatever, bisexual, it doesn't matter to me. Is it good advice? I don't know if it's good advice. It sounds good. I'm just going to try it. I have this appetite for risk. I'm like, man, I don't need to vet this more than this. I'm just going to go for it. Somebody says, meet me here and do this. I'm like, I do. And then sometimes I'm scared. Like, am I going to be like buried in the desert? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Society's made me afraid of people, but I show up anyways. And here I am. I haven't been murdered yet. So let's see what happens. And so I'm okay with that, and I've learned from lots of people who look nothing like me, who don't share my experiences, and 80% of it could be bad. I'm looking for the 20 that's good. And when I apply it and it doesn't work out for me, I don't say like, oh, well, how did I mess this up? I'm like, it didn't work for me. I need to reevaluate the formula and see if I can apply it again and again. When I feel like I've done everything I can with the circumstances, the resources, and the constraints that I have, and it doesn't work, I don't say it doesn't work. It just doesn't work for me at this point in time. Because you'll find this in your own life, I'm sure of it, if you've been in business long enough. Something that somebody said to you 10 years ago didn't work, but will work right now. So we wholesale say those things don't work. We're robbing ourselves of a wonderful opportunity to learn and grow. So I just want to put that out there. Okay. Now let's talk about the stakes. You say, what are the stakes? Well, the stakes are high and they have cost us. Like one time when my boys were much younger, I said, I had stayed up all night preparing for a workshop. I ran the workshop and I could not keep my eyes open as soon as we got into the hotel. They're playing video games together. They're still that age, right? I said, boys, your only assignment tomorrow is to get us to the airport on time. Here's the plane information. And then I just black out. Throughout my sleep, I could hear them playing video games. So I'm thinking, oh my God, I don't know if they took me seriously. So I set my alarm right before I go to sleep. And then I wake up at 6 in the morning and they're out cold. No bags are packed. I'm starting to get a little bit worried here. And so I shower, I stay quiet, whatever. And then I wake him up at the last possible minute. Boys, we have to get going. How are we going to get there? And my oldest gets up and he's like, we're going to take Uber. I'm like, that's not what I asked you to do. I wanted you to figure out how we can get there without just calling someone else to solve the problem for us. It was one small challenge. Well, guess what? We missed our flight. They didn't even let us through the gate. They're like, we're closing. You can't go through. So we had to get another flight. We waited at the airport for 6 hours. My son had this look of dread on his face, and he knew he failed. And he felt that stress, and I wanted him to feel the consequence of not making great decisions, because I told him how to do it. I said, go downstairs, talk to the concierge. Their entire job is to help you with these kinds of things. They'll tell you exactly where to go and what to do. And they decided not to take that advice. So then I have to call my wife and say, honey, we've missed the flight. My schedule's clear. We're gonna have to figure this out. And she goes, okay, you need help? I'm like, no, we got this. So we sat at the airport for 6 hours while we got another flight. Consequences were low, but the real consequences would have been go back to another hotel, pay for that, book another flight, and possibly miss work things that I have to do. So there are always consequences. And then I ask you, what are the stakes at home? What are they doing that you feel that is like irreversible? What is it? I'm curious.
I don't think that there are consequences that are irreversible necessarily. Nothing's really permanent, right? Except death
Some
and
things. Yeah, like you lose a finger, that's kind of permanent.
Yeah. I just feel like it's the everyday things. It's all those tiny decisions that you have to make that are tough. And the mental load of making those decisions constantly. And so again,
I think that's
I don't hate I'm not hating on anything.
Yeah.
But I also acknowledge that like everything that I receive, I'm going to take with a grain of salt.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I can empathize with your wife, but I can also empathize with you. So I appreciate the mental sparring that we did today.
Yes, but I want to say this though. I want to say this to you. I think we catastrophize things. And this is an old story from our parents. It doesn't matter if you're Asian, white, black, or man or woman. We inherit a lot of stories that aren't just true, or were true at one point, but are no longer true today. Right? And so I think this, right? What I would want for all people to live as free of a life as possible, to start to develop a connection between decision and consequence, action and reaction all the time. And they don't develop that skill if we're always helping them around those decisions, right? This is literally what would happen. My boys are young, would go to the park. My wife would bring them to the top of the stairs and say, you ready? And she would literally run down as fast as possible to the bottom of the stairs or the slide, so that when they got off, she could catch them. I'm like, honey, just let them fall. They'll figure it out. There's geometry and physics here. They'll figure it out. But she didn't let them fall. Now, I'm going to say I'm not the best dad in the world, because when I was given the task of watching my then infant son, I took my eye off him for 1 second. And he fell off the couch, and I heard a loud thud on the floor. I was like horrified. And he screams like a banshee. He fell off the couch onto a concrete floor in my studio. I just put him like, boy, you're there. He's chill. He's chill. I go get a book. I turn around, he fell down. And my wife is just like ready to kill me. She goes, I asked you to do one thing. Watch the boy. And you couldn't even do that. I'm sorry, babe. But you know what? I don't think he'll fall down again. And since then, he's never fallen off the couch, because he knows the danger. Come to the edge. He butt scoots down instead of going face forward. You learn. I've taught him how to ride a bicycle. I've taught my children how to climb on ropes across a cliff that if they fell, they would die. So it's this overprotection, this kind of helicopter parenting that I think is robbing them of a sense of pride, sense of discovery, and learning that little mistakes today have consequences, so that when you're older, big mistakes have bigger consequences. That's all I'm trying to do. So what we want to do for children, I think, is to give them healthy and clear guardrails, but are really wide, and let them play, and they're like freaking animals. So I tell them there's some basic rules. Respect other people, and there's zero tolerance for physical violence. Zero tolerance. If you do that, I will rain upon you. Luckily, it's never happened.
We have a comment that Chris is likable and hateable at the same time.
That's the perfect
Um,
brand for me.
I
Love
know
to
that
hate me.
Aditi has had a question, so let's do Aditi, and then I think
Okay.
we want to honor your time.
Yes, because I have a call at 1:30. Let's
Yeah.
go.
Okay. So Aditi.
Hi, Chris. So, actually, right now I'm working on my personal brand. I'm working on my personal brand. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm just listening.
Yeah, okay. So, how to carry forward that whole personality throughout? Like, because I want to like what I wear and how I look and how the way I approach clients and all those things. How do I carry forward that whole time?
What's holding you
Because
back?
no, I mean sometimes you don't sometimes you feel that it's you are you are holding back or you don't know everything which you want to share and everything. So that is the thing. Like sometimes because I'm very introvert person and it's very hard for me to connect with people. So this is the main challenge for me. So how do I overcome that?
Okay. All right. So it sounds to me, Aditi, hello, by the way, that there's a lot of things that you're telling yourself that you have to be able to do in order to do the first thing. And no one runs a marathon without taking their first step. Like before you can get to mile whatever, you have to cross the first mile. And I think we put too much pressure on ourselves to know what we need to know. Like I know a lot, but I don't know what I need to know. And I'm going to just do whatever I do. And if I get it wrong, so be it. It's this narrative about mistakes, and like mistakes are so painful for many of us. Now, speaking again for my wife, she cannot make a mistake because making a mistake brings a certain amount of scorn and then a feeling of you're not worthy of being loved. I love my mistakes. I tried to play this game with my whole family in the car. I'm like, guys, everybody, let's just say something dumb that we've made, like a stupid mistake. I'm like, let's go. I would say one. The boys would say nothing. I'm like, honey, you go. She wouldn't say anything. I'm like, I'll do it again. Let's go round two. I would do it again and again. I want to normalize this idea of making mistakes because we're so afraid of making them that we wind up making nothing. And that's the biggest problem. Everybody who wants to build a personal brand, well, guess what? As soon as you have a point of view, people are going to throw stones at you. If you can't handle that, then you're just not going to be able to do this. And people think, they're like, some of my friends who are European, like, oh, it's easy for you to say. People don't hate on you. I'm like, go ahead and bring out your most hateful comments and we'll do a hate list. I'll show you my sheet and you show me yours. I don't even have to look that long, just look at yesterday. And I'm going to tell you the amount of hate I get, the vitriolic, like the kind of comments on physical appearances and tone of voice or whatever it is, they're coming right at me. It brings a smile to my face. Because I know if I'm saying something and no one has a reaction, I'm not saying anything. And some of you are like, we love some parts, we hate some parts. That's how this works. I'm not here for everyone. I'm here for people who want to hear what I have to say. That's it. So Aditi, I've known you for some time. If you don't make the content, you're just playing the waiting game. And one day, you won't have that opportunity. Because tomorrow is something we all take for granted. So if you say to yourself, what if I can't fail? And operate under that premise and see what happens. And if you ever want to do it, you can go back to my original content on day one of YouTube. It sucks. It's terrible. I'm terrible. I suck. But you got to get through the suck to get to the good. And you get through the good to get great. I don't know where I am, but I'm putting in the miles. Okay? All right. Was there a final question or was that it?
No, thank you so, so much. And everybody wants you to come back. So please come back.
Ooh,
And
yes.
yes, we really appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time and your energy. And I think everybody learned a lot. So happy Valentine's Day to you and your wife.
When is that? Is that tomorrow? That's today?
Yeah.
When is that? Oh my God.
Yeah. And everybody's saying thank you and just have
Thank
a
you,
beautiful
everybody.
rest of your day. Thank you.
Yes. Stay blessed, everybody. And I hope that you got something valuable from today's conversation. Despite me being a man, I hope you got something. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
So much.
Bye.
Bye.